Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we read the refreshing, happy, joyful chapter 8 of the book of Zechariah.
Yeah.
So today, Jerusalem before their captivity, it was beautiful, peaceful, wonderful, and then they went into exile, and of course things went downhill before they went into exile, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But now that they've returned, life looks nothing like it did before. And so they're probably struggling. And I think God comes to them and he recognizes this in them. He recognizes they need something to cling to. They need hope. They need restoration and redemption. And so this chapter is a chapter of hope, and he gives them a future look at what things are going to be like. And he tells them Jerusalem is gonna come back, and the good days are going to be back. Kids can play in the streets. People from all over the world are going to flock to it because they want to see, they want to walk where Jesus walked. And personally, like, those days are here. Like, I cannot wait for a little more peace in Israel to get back there. But those days, they're in those days. And then he tells of like the future hope, a glimpse of the future hope that they're going to have. And he kind of shows them your ancestors broke covenant with me, and so that was the whole purpose of the exile. So let's do it differently. Let's not be like the generations that came before you, but instead let's have a relationship. And he tells them a few different ways to do that, just like he did, I think, in the previous chapter. In verses 16 and 17, he says, "Speak truth to one another, render in your gates judgments that are true, and make for peace. Do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. Love no false oath. For all of these things I hate, declares the Lord." And remember in yesterday's chapter, they also had made this ceremony of fasting and mourning and weeping. Yeah. And so he's like, instead of fasting, just to go through the motions of that, how about like your fasting is based upon our relationship? And then the fruit of that fasting, and I think it's verse 19 that talks about that, is seasons of joy and gladness and cheerful feasts. And it's based on love and truth and peace and relationship with God. And so this chapter is beautiful and full of hope, and God's showing them what it can be, what it will be in the future.
Yeah. The other side to look at this is, and we're not sure kind of where to draw the lines. I'm not sure even Zechariah was. I mean, certainly the Holy Spirit gave all of this. But it doesn't mean Zechariah saw it all. And so what we find is him giving these wonderful words about what the future of Jerusalem is going to be like. And it's almost like what he's saying is the old promises are true. And you can keep going back to those. And so you now have, again, where God is telling his people what he's told them all along. Mm-hmm. He said, "They shall be my people. I will be their God in truth and in righteousness." He said these old promises are true. He says, and if you're looking ahead, even after all the discipline you faced, I'm going to do something you're not even going to understand. As a matter of fact, when you see it, it is going to be shocking to you how much I'm going to bless you. And so there's this marriage between some of the stuff he's talking about. You go, well, we've seen it. We saw him bring them back from exile. We saw him grow his people. I mean, how often today do we hear about stories where Israel's getting in trouble by its neighbors because they're overflowing their land and they're growing? And well, God is blessing kind of the population of his people. But here's the thing. Whereas some of this has probably been fulfilled in the last, since this promise was made. They came back from exile, they rebuilt, they blossomed, and now even today they're growing, and some of this is now, but a lot of this can only be fulfilled in like the future kingdom. And so what he's saying is, I'm going to give you a here and now, but I'm also going to give you a there and later kind of promise.
And then a fulfillment.
Yeah, I like that. And so whenever you read through this, it's hard to draw those lines, because where he says, there's going to be a day where there's going to be such prosperity and such security that old men are going to sit in the streets, and they're going to be so old, they're going to have their walking sticks with them. They're going to sit there and they're not going to be afraid. Well, listen, there have been seasons where that's been the case. Mm-hmm. And I think if we probably went over there today, there's still pockets of that where they're not as worried as they once were, even weeks ago. So there is that. I remember one of the first times I was in Jerusalem, we were in the old city. And we're walking through the old city, and I remember just kind of seeing, older folks kind of on the sidewalks, and then little kids like getting out of school and running up and down the streets, and they're calling their daddy who owns the shop over there, and they're waving, they're Abba, 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 and that's how they say daddy, and so they're running to him, and I just remember thinking, man, the Lord has taken a place where we have always thought about with such tension and conflict, and He's made it a home again for the old and for the young. And now certainly there are security issues. So you go, well, what about, I thought there was supposed to be none of that. Well, one day there won't be.
People don't like God's people.
That's right. So one day all of this is going to be made, and you're going to go, well, now I don't even see how that's possible. Well, then you got to remember Matthew 19:26, that with men these things are impossible, but with God all things are possible. And so, but the beauty of Zion, which he's calling, which is the name for God's holy land. So if you're outside of Israel and you talk about Zion, you're talking about Israel. If you're in Israel and you're talking about Zion, then you're talking about Jerusalem. If you're in Jerusalem and you're talking about Zion, you're talking about the mountain where the temple was at. So it's all a matter of like, where are you? But Zion is God's land, and the beauty of it is not even just the beauty and the prosperity and the future like security. It's that I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth. Well, the beautiful part is that God will live among His people, and His love and His promises of blessing and prosperity are going to shock people when they hear them. But God's not surprised. He's had all this planned. He said it'll be marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days. Will it also be marvelous in my eyes? He said, you're going to have a hard time believing it, but this has always been my plan. And so I like what you pointed out. I think He's pointing to even His people having not just a new city, but a new ethic, a new way of life. These are the things you shall do. Every man speak truth to his neighbor. Tell the truth. He said, give judgment in gates and for truth and justice and peace. That's about their court system. Like, have a just system of justice. Let none of you think evil in your heart against your neighbors. He says, even in your thoughts and even in your heart.
That counts.
Love your neighbor as yourself, because all that counts. Mm-hmm. And then do not love a false oath. Don't be making promises that you're not willing to keep, and don't say you're one thing but be another. We make this way more complicated than it is. Tell the truth. Be just. Love your neighbor as yourself in your heart and in your mind, and then be people of integrity.
It's like love God, love people.
Like love God, love people. Even, like Micah, love justice and mercy and faithfulness and walk humbly before your God. This is what He wants for His people. And He says, one day it's going to happen. He said, you'll get glimpses of it here, but I'm just showing you that's only a glimpse of what's to come.
And to tell you, I can't help but think if the right now, when we have been to Israel, if that's a glimpse, I can't even imagine the future glory and the new Jerusalem that it's going to be, because this is a place when you're there, it's holy land. You do in your heart. Mm-hmm. And even when you're away, like if you've been before, you're almost homesick for this. So I can't even imagine what the new Jerusalem is going to be like, the fulfillment of all of this.
Yeah. So Zechariah marries all that together, and he says, glimpse now, but better,
behold it
better
later.
Yet to come, So anyway, that's chapter 8. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter number 9.
8.
Yeah, chapter 8 was an upper.
Yes.
It brought you a little bit. All right, see you later.
Bye.